A modern cruiser and a modern destroyer can stand side by side and refuse to explain themselves. Both may have flat radar panels, vertical missile launchers, a flight deck, a main gun, and the same gray, low-drama silhouette. From the outside, the difference can look like a naming habit. But the real split is usually hidden inside the ship, in spare volume, power, cooling, combat system layout, command spaces, magazine depth, and the job the Navy expects that hull to sustain under pressure. So the comparison has to start with a warning. Cruiser and destroyer are not universal technical labels. They shift by Navy, era, doctrine, budget politics, and even historical pride. A ship called a destroyer in one fleet may carry a cruiser-like mission load, while an older cruiser may share design roots with a destroyer. The useful question is not, which label sounds stronger? The useful question is, what is this ship built, equipped, and assigned to do? Point 1 is hull volume, because every later difference begins with physical space. A larger hull does not automatically make a better warship, but it gives designers more room for fuel, crew spaces, electronics, cooling equipment, magazines, workshops, and future upgrades. That spare room is called design margin. It is the difference between fitting a system on paper and fitting it without overloading the ship, making maintenance miserable, or removing something else that the crew still needs. A cruiser-like design often uses that margin to carry more command facilities, more missiles, more communications gear, and more redundancy. Redundancy means backup paths for power, cooling, control, and damage response when the ship is hurt or a system fails. That matters because a surface combatant is not just a weapon rack. It is a floating network of machines that must keep sensing, deciding, moving, and fighting while saltwater, vibration, heat, and time attack everything on board. A destroyer-like design usually accepts tighter margins in exchange for efficiency and numbers. It can still be large, fast, and heavily armed, but it is often optimized as a flexible escort and multi-role combatant rather than as the central command node of a task group. That can be a very smart trade. A Navy may prefer more deployable destroyers over fewer larger ships because sea control depends on presence, maintenance cycles, and coverage across wide areas, not only on the biggest hull in the harbor. The first catch is cost. More volume helps, but it also tends to bring more steel, more equipment, more shipyard work, more fuel demand, more maintenance, and sometimes more crew or more complex automation. A bigger ship can carry more capability, but it can also become harder to afford in useful numbers. This is the quiet engineering enemy in the whole comparison. The impressive design that works on a poster but becomes too expensive, too fragile, or too overloaded to support as a fleet asset. Point 2 is weapon capacity, and this is where the comparison looks simple for about 10 seconds. Modern destroyers and cruisers often use vertical launch systems, where missiles sit in cells below deck and fire upward when needed. The cell count matters because each loaded cell is a finite choice. One cell might hold an air defense missile, another a land attack missile, another an anti-submarine weapon, and in some systems, a smaller missile can be packed differently. Capacity is not just a number. It is a mission budget. A public example shows the pattern clearly. United States Navy Ticonderoga-class cruisers carry 122 Mark 41 vertical launch cells. Many Arleigh Burke-class destroyers carry 90 or 96, depending on the flight. That does not mean the cruiser automatically wins every comparison. It means the cruiser has a deeper missile magazine and more loadout flexibility inside that particular design family. In a long operation, those extra cells can become time, options, and risk control. Magazine depth matters most when the ship must do several jobs at once. A task group may need air defense, ballistic, or long-range air defense support where the system is designed for it, anti-submarine protection, land attack, and surface strike capacity. Every missile loaded for one mission is not available for another. A destroyer can be extremely capable, but a tighter magazine forces sharper choices. A cruiser-like platform has more room to carry a broader mix, or to stay useful longer before the magazine becomes the limiting factor. The second catch is that launch cells are not magic storage drawers. At-sea reloading of large vertical launch missiles is difficult and has not been routine for most modern fleets. Once a ship fires a large share of its missiles, restoring that capacity usually means reaching a suitable port or specialized support arrangement. So the question is not only how many can it fire, it is also how long can it remain relevant after the first wave of decisions. That is why magazine depth links directly to endurance and fleet planning. Guns, close-in defenses, torpedoes, helicopters, and decoys still matter, but they do not replace the deeper logic. A main gun can support warning shots, surface engagements, or limited shore work depending on design and ammunition. Close-in systems and decoys are last layers of defense, not excuses to ignore the missile fight. Helicopters extend the ship's eyes and anti-submarine reach, but all of these pieces only make sense as one combat system. A destroyer and a cruiser differ less by having unique gadgets, and more by how much total mission load they can support. Point 3 is the hidden layer, sensors and combat management. A ship cannot use its weapons well if it cannot detect, classify, track, share, and prioritize threats in time. Modern surface combatants use radars, sonar, electronic support systems, data links, communications, and combat management software to turn scattered signals into decisions. This is where a ship that looks similar from the pier can behave very differently in a formation. Radar placement and power demand are not small details. Large fixed radar arrays need clear fields of view, stable foundations, electrical power, cooling, and space for processors and support equipment. Put the radar too low, and the horizon limits detection. Put too much heavy equipment high on the ship, and stability becomes harder. The designer is always trading height, weight, heat, wiring routes, and survivability. A cruiser-like hull may have more margin for that integration, but a well-designed destroyer can still carry world-class sensors. The combat management system is the ship's nervous system. It receives sensor data, builds tracks, helps the crew judge threats, assigns weapons, and communicates with other ships and aircraft. In a cruiser-like role, the system may also support wider coordination for a group, not just self-defense. That means more consoles, more communication channels, more staff capacity, and more procedures for controlling a complicated air and missile defense picture. The extra value is not visible as a bigger gun. It appears when many threats and many friendly units must be managed at once. Destroyers can still be advanced sensor platforms. The Arleigh Burke class, Japan's Maya class, the United Kingdom's Type 45 class, and other modern destroyers show how far the destroyer label has moved from its older meaning. Some are built around high-end air defense, some emphasize anti-submarine work, some balance several roles. The label alone does not tell you the radar quality, software maturity, crew training, or doctrine. That is why comparing cruiser and destroyer as names can mislead, while comparing combat system integration gives a much cleaner answer. Point 4 is area air defense and command. Area air defense means protecting more than the ship itself. It means helping defend a carrier group, amphibious group, convoy, or surface action group across a wider space. The ship must detect threats, share tracks, decide priorities, and sometimes guide or coordinate engagements that involve other units. This is where a cruiser-like platform often earns its keep. Not by being dramatic, but by being a stable command and control hub when the air picture becomes crowded. In United States practice, Ticonderoga-class cruisers have often been used as air defense commanders for carrier strike groups. Their Aegis combat system, larger missile capacity, and command spaces fit that role. But this is not a universal law of the sea. A destroyer can perform high-end air defense tasks if it has the sensors, weapons, communications, crew training, and doctrine for the job. The blurred line is real. The difference is not always whether the ship can defend the group. It is how much command load it is built to carry while doing so. This is also why a pure missile count can be deceptive. A ship with many launch cells but weak integration is not a clean solution. A ship with excellent sensors but too shallow a magazine may run out of options during a sustained fight. A ship with good equipment but limited command space may protect itself well but struggle to manage a wider formation. Cruiser-like employment usually means capacity plus coordination. Destroyer-like employment usually means flexible combat value, escort strength, and the ability to plug into a larger force. Point 5 is multi-role mission balance. Destroyers became central to modern fleets because they can cover many jobs without needing to be the largest ship present. They can escort carriers, amphibious ships, logistics ships, and convoys. They can support air defense, hunt submarines, launch land attack missiles if fitted and loaded for that mission, and operate as visible naval presence in distant waters. That flexibility is not a compromise in a bad sense. It is the reason many navies keep building destroyer-like platforms. Anti-submarine warfare shows the trade clearly. A good anti-submarine ship needs sonar, often including a hull sonar and sometimes a towed array, plus quieting measures, torpedoes, helicopters, trained operators, and patience. Size helps with aviation facilities, fuel, and equipment rooms, but it does not automatically create a better submarine hunter. Noise control, sensor fit, crew skill, and doctrine matter heavily. A destroyer optimized for anti-submarine escort may be more useful in that role than a larger ship built mainly for command and air defense. Surface strike and land attack work the same way. A cruiser-like ship may carry more missiles and more command capacity, but a destroyer can carry a meaningful strike load if its vertical launch cells are filled for that mission. The real constraint is the total mission mix. Load more land attack missiles, and you may carry fewer air defense interceptors. Load more anti-submarine weapons, and other options shrink. The ship is always a set of choices made before the crisis begins. That is why efficient fleet planning matters more than a long weapons brochure. Point 6 is cost, crew, and logistics, the least glamorous part of the comparison, and often the most decisive. A navy does not buy one perfect ship and call the problem solved. It needs hulls available for deployment, hulls in training, hulls in maintenance, crews in the pipeline, spare parts in storage, and shipyards able to modernize the class over decades. A ship that is too expensive to maintain can lose practical value even if its design is impressive. Reliability is a combat feature, not an accounting footnote. Larger cruiser-like ships can justify themselves when their added command capacity, missile depth, endurance, and integration solve a real fleet problem. But if the same navy can field more destroyers, cover more sea lanes, escort more groups, and keep more hulls ready, the destroyer-heavy option may be smarter. This is not a moral verdict on size. It is arithmetic under saltwater. Every extra radar, cell, generator, cooling plant, and command suite must be paid for again through training, maintenance, upgrades, and repair. Crew workload is part of the design. Automation can reduce some tasks, but complex ships still need trained people to operate sensors, maintain weapons, manage engineering systems, fly helicopters, repair damage, and make decisions under stress. More systems can mean more capability, but also more failure points and more specialized training. The practical ship is the one a navy can keep competent crews on, year after year. This is where a destroyer may look less spectacular than a cruiser on paper, but become more valuable through availability. Point 7 is tactical role inside a formation. A destroyer is often the flexible working combatant of the group. It may screen against submarines, add air defense coverage, escort high-value ships, patrol choke points, fire land attack missiles, or join a surface action group. It is expected to move where the fleet needs a capable escort, with enough sensors, weapons, and endurance to handle several threat types. In simple terms, the destroyer is often the adaptable guard, scout, and striker in one hull. A cruiser-like platform, where the distinction still exists, tends to carry a heavier control burden. It may coordinate group air defense, serve as a flagship-like command node, carry a deeper missile inventory, and sustain high-end operations for longer before its capacity becomes the limiting factor. That role demands more than size. It demands communications, workstations, trained staff, reliable power and cooling, and a combat system that can manage complexity without drowning the crew in noise. The tactical difference is the scale of responsibility the ship is built to sustain. The threat environment keeps pushing the two categories together. Anti-ship missiles, aircraft, submarines, drones, coastal defenses, electronic warfare, and long-range targeting networks all demand better sensors, better missiles, better communications, and better survivability. As destroyers grow to meet those demands, some become cruiser-like in size and function. China's Type 055 is officially called a destroyer by China, while many outside observers describe it as cruiser-like because of its scale and apparent role. That disagreement proves the larger point. The name is only the start of the analysis. Older cruiser classes also complicate the picture. Some cruisers remain in service because they still provide command capacity or missile depth that a navy values, even if newer destroyers have more modern systems in some areas. Others retire because age, maintenance burden, crew demand, and modernization cost outweigh their advantages. A cruiser can become expensive capacity. A destroyer can become near cruiser capability. The boundary moves because technology, doctrine, and budgets move. So here is the practical decision rule. If a navy needs a flexible escort that can defend, patrol, hunt, strike, and plug into many task groups, it is asking for a destroyer-like platform. If it needs deeper magazines, wider command coordination, more staff capacity, and sustained control of a high-end group defense mission, it is asking for a cruiser-like platform. The exact label may still depend on politics and tradition. The engineering pattern is less slippery than the name. The final answer is layered. Hull margin creates room for systems and upgrades. Weapon capacity creates mission depth. Sensors and combat management decide whether weapons can be used well. Command spaces decide how much of the wider fight the ship can coordinate. Economics decide how many ships can actually be kept ready. Tactical role ties all of that to the fleet. A destroyer is not merely a small cruiser, and a cruiser is not merely a bigger destroyer. They are different balances of capacity, control, cost, and operational responsibility. That is why modern warship labels can blur without becoming meaningless. The clean question is never just, is it called a cruiser or a destroyer? The clean question is, how much can it carry, coordinate, survive, maintain, and use effectively with the rest of the fleet? Naval design is not about the longest weapon list. It is about matching capability to a mission a navy can actually control, afford, repair, crew, and deploy when the sea stops being a diagram.